Nothing? You guys hear it?
I hear it.
Time's an illusion, but it's true, it's spirit. Source beyond space and time, no need to fear it. Everything's part of some eternal plan, from beginning to end in algorithmic hands. Time's on the side. Evolutions of Christ. Universe grows, complexity's king. Humans play a hand in cosmic destiny. Butterfly effects, history's twist. We'll all be Christ in the end if evolution persists. Time's on the side. Evolution of guys.
Well, so Giant's camera seems to have seppuku'd. So we don't have camera. But we do have Noel, which is pretty cool. And so Noel, along with Giant's presentation, and Giant's here. Hey, say hi, Giant.
Hello.
Let him know.
Hello.
I have him.
Hello.
I have him here. Just send $20,000 to this address, and you can have him back.
Yes.
Basically. But Giant is here, and so Giant, we're gonna do the second half of the presentation, but also we're gonna go back maybe like 10 minutes and do the like. You can kind of refresh us on like where we were going because we went a little ahead, I think, at the end there. So go ahead and just continue on where you feel like we were, at high energy point. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think from my memory, we just got to the part in the presentation where we're talking a little bit about it opening up a gate and some of the symbology and stuff. I don't know. Can they see the screen right now? The
Totally.
Rosen Bridge?
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah. So I don't think we left off right here, but we were going into elements of Egyptian symbology, the Rosicrucians, the fact that they called it the Einstein-Rosen Bridge might play into it a little bit. It's either just life does things like that, or they did it on purpose. But yeah, it's the wormholes related to the rose, the female side, or something like that, right? It's a polar thing, and it's a bridge, and then this symbology is also embedded into Ophiuchus. It's like a U shape with the snake crossing in and the worm being related to the snake. Let's see. We'll move on. Oh. All right. Yeah, we spoke about this where it shows Geb putting his arm through Nit, which is, what I feel is the Milky Way, showing a representation of the Milky Way, and then the leg through on the opposite side. So that's your Orion and your Ophiuchus that are touching the Milky Way on opposite sides of the ecliptic. So it's where it touches, the ecliptic touches the Milky Way galactic plane, essentially. So and anytime, Noel, I don't know if there's anything specific you wanted to say about any of these, but I'll go through.
I was watching your previous thing, and that inspired me because you mentioned a couple of things of interest. So they're not exactly the same culture, but I suppose that based on the assumption of a cosmopolis.
Giant, can you get what do you call it? Do you have earplugs or ear headphones?
Yes, I do. I have my headphones in.
Oh, okay. I heard it.
Is it echoing?
Yeah. That's okay. I turned on echo cancellation. I think it's okay now. Sorry. Go ahead, Noel.
Oh, because you were saying, like the gods knew a pathway by which they would come down at certain times, and so
Yeah.
you're talking about gates, and there's actually in the Upanishads, it's an old idea, but you also see it in the Vedanta of the Devayana, or like the path of the gods, and that these gates open at certain times, and that if one like dies during these times, if they know the Devayana, they can like go up into the sun disk, because you
Yeah.
talked about first there's like the sun, and then there's another path leading up to Brahma and in the whorl of the lotus,
Yes.
connected with the Milky Way. So just as like just introducing the topic, because there's a lot to talk about there.
Okay.
You're talking about the Vishnu Nabi, and the Nabi just means like the navel, like the belly button and
Yes.
navel. So you're talking about like all the like in the whorl of the galaxy, or like a lotus, like there's a connection with the astrology to the navel. So I'm not learned in Jyotish. I've just like taken a quick overlook of it, but I've studied Sanskrit at the
Yeah.
university and with private tutors. But so like I know some of the other information, like from the texts, like what is that bond then? So you were like saying something. One of the things I could quickly just supply the information is the bond that is that lotus between Brahma and Vishnu is the buddhi, or intelligence, which
Yeah.
is said to be like you might already know this actually, the mahat, or like the first principle, or pradhan, from which all the other like sort of evolutes come into existence. So it's more like an evolution of consciousness, and then
Yeah.
it becomes an evolution of matter.
Yep.
So you may be familiar. You're probably familiar with like Pradhan and Mahat and those kind of things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So my understanding of those, at least when I'm just trying to teach other people, at least a little bit of an understanding of what it was, the story of Brahma and how existence came from him. Those are stages of him figuring out himself and then creating all these different layers, right? So there's chaotic characters, or very one archetypical kind of feelings to the first characters that he makes, and then he starts mixing them down. You're kind of talking about that, right?
Yeah, like Brahma is the buddhi, and he's like sort of like the deity of karma. Like he creates all the
Yeah.
fashions all the bodies for people's karmas, for the karmas of the jivas. So like is like all these like first, he's giving like the primary functions some form, from his mind. So they're called like Manasaputra, means like mind born son, or mind born offsprings. Like
Yes.
Shiva is born from his mind. Like he
Yep.
has like he's like a godhead. So like they're all the gods are in him, or the devas.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also mantras. I wanted to add one thing, is that the thing about devas is sometimes we use the word gods because we're speaking English, but it actually comes from the Sanskrit verbal root div, which
Yeah.
has two prominent meanings. One is to shine, and the other is to play. So
Yep.
it has been
Yeah.
shown, yeah, by like the PIE scholars, like the Proto-Indo-European scholars of linguistics, that this div root is cognate with our Western or like European words like divine that we have in English and other things.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So
Divide, right? To divide things, right? So Brahma, Abraham, all this, they were the ones that things got divided from, right? So you see that over and over again. And even David, the name David and all that is like DVD, or to divide things, split things into opposing characters so that there is existence, right? There has to be division, has to be opposites, so that there's collision, so that there's even any kind of spin, and that there's interaction, or there's nothing, pretty much, right?
yeah, like they're evolving out of the one, so the one is becoming various stages of becoming two, and then four, like three. There's all kinds of numbers coming out of the one, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I'm not so much educated on the astrological stuff, but I know the like cosmological, and also like the lore. I know a lot of the lore, so I
That's
help fill
perfect.
any gaps.
Yeah.
If you're like
Yep.
looking for some information, like if so there's some of the Upanishads that mention about the gates, like let me see where, I think I looked up something. So if you look in the Upanishads, there's a couple of the Upanishads, like the Brihadaranyaka.
You can share your screen too if you want.
Oh, I don't need to share my screen too much. I don't have like
as you like
a PowerPoint ready, but like the Kausitaki Upanishad or like the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad talk about this thing like the Devayana. So Devayana, Ayana is like a path or a vehicle or like a way to go, like a going. And it starts with like, because actually, so the good news is that the gates are always open, or they're not always open, but they're open often. So they're open for like half the year. So if you ever read Bhagavad Gita, I think a lot of people have, it talks about like a path of fire and a path of smoke, right? So those who travel the path of the gods and the path of fire ascend to the sun planet and are not born again. And those who ascend to the lunar planet through the path of the smoke reside with their ancestors for some eons and then return to work on their karmas again. But the Devayana, if you read in the Vedanta Sutra, it summarizes from the various Upanishads, like the Maitri, etc., that it would begin during the day. So one should leave one's body during the daytime, right? And then one should leave one's body. That daytime should be the daytime that's within the bright lunar fortnight. So when the moon is waxing. So one should leave one's body during the day when the moon is waxing. And then during the sun's northern ascent, right? So when the sun is traveling to the north, that's called the Uttarayan. And then during the Uttarayan is the from that position, then it says that a yogi can walk up the sunbeams into the solar disk, to reside amongst the gods. So you don't have to travel on the Devayan path. I mean, there's other ways through like devotion or like you can get help from a deva. Like there's also like vehicles that'll come and like in the text it describes like these like aerial vehicles that'll come and like take souls up into heaven, like who don't know the path but like who deserve.
Can I add to that real fast?
Oh yeah, you can interrupt me anytime, bro. I'll just keep talking. Just interrupt me anytime.
Yeah, no problem. So what I hear astrologically, astronomically is so I was showing on the last presentation that the upward or the high noon is considered Capricorn, and this would be more considered with the Golden Gate, and Cancer would be considered with the Silver Gate, right? And so that's it, that would be the moon, and then the opposite is obviously connected to the sun. And so I think that there is, obviously gates that open up also on a microcosm that happen during the actual day and night and stuff like that. But this is also showing you that it happens in these aeons too. So when these alignments happen and you're aiming towards the galactic sun, that this gate opens, this golden gate for the gods. And it's the same thing. One side is the smoke, which is the Shibulba, right? It's the dark side of the Milky Way, essentially. And then the other is the light side, because you're headed towards the center of the Milky Way rather than out of the Milky Way. And so that's where you got like Betelgeuse. I don't know if you guys can see my screen, but that's where Betelgeuse, right? Betelgeuse. And why in the movie they show that there's this waiting room and all this stuff. It's kind of the characteristics to that side is more comedic, more vulgar. There's different elements to that side than the other side. So there's always these opposing things. And so anyways, that's what it was reminding me of when you were talking about that, right? You're the smoke side and the light side, and then being able to go towards, God, because I believe that Vishnu in the astronomical way of viewing it is towards the galaxy center, right? He's sleeping, probably resting there. At least astrology and symbology has, I think, embedded that a little bit, that's what they believe.
Well, are you familiar with any of the Puranas? like the Purana just means old, but this is like the lore of like the Dharma traditions, like the Indic traditions, like
Yep.
South Asian. So you're familiar with the Puranas, like there's something, fifth canto in one of the Puranas called the Bhagavat Purana, and there's a whole chapter dedicated to something called the Shishumara chakra, and Shishumara means dolphin.
Yeah.
Dolphin. So there's like a dolphin wheel. Have you ever heard of this? Like the dolphin wheel is like a disc of stars.
No, but that's very interesting. Yeah, you were
Yeah.
mentioning that before we got on, but yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
So like here, one of the verses here early on. So there's a whole chapter dedicated to this. I could send you. Is there a chat here or something I could put this in?
Yeah, there's a private chat on the right side there. You
Let's
could
see.
chat, or you could also read it.
I'll just put a link in here in case anybody wants to look at this stuff. You could maybe
Mr. Rogers.
So I was just gonna let me see here. Okay, and then so it says like Kechana means just some people. Like it's like an in. Okay, then Etat Joti Anikam Shishumara Samstanena. So there's like a image of a dolphin, right? Which is Joti Anikam. Joti Anikam means like a, I don't know, like an arrangement or like a phalanx or like a disc, right? And so it's also being described as it's Shishumar chakra. So there's a form of Vishnu which is a disc of stars, right? That is shaped like a dolphin, right? And then it goes on further to describe with like its head pointed towards the center, right?
Yeah, and it's
like
two dolphins. You said.
I feel like I read that somewhere. Okay. But there's like a disc that's swimming. Hold on. It's like are you familiar with the idea of Vishvarup? Like the idea that the universe is like a form of God.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So like the universe is like a form of God, and it in here it's describing it from like an astral perspective. Like this is something that can be meditated upon. It's like a disc of stars, right? It's just kind of interesting. It's just interesting when I think of a dolphin, I'm thinking of like a curved, like a fish. And it's saying that the universe, there's a form of the Lord, which is the universe, which is like a disc of stars. It's uncanny, It's like, man.
And the dolphin in the Hindus, or at least one of the characteristics of the makara, right? You know what the makara is?
Yeah, it's an aquatic.
Yeah, it's like a dolphin body, and the I forget what her name is, but she's the goddess of the rivers.
Oh, the Ganga.
The Ganges, yeah. She rides on these makaras, right? And they wear earrings that are makaras, and their water features at their temples are all makara and makara. And it's a dolphin. Yeah, dolphin with sometimes an elephant tusk. It's a chimera character, but a dolphin is a big feature of it, right? And the makara is Capricorn.
Sometimes they put that they kind of just merge. Makara is like an aquatic. It can be used to describe a dolphin or a crocodile or a shark.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes the artists just combine all the features into like a single concept, but it's sort of like just like an aquatic category for like a large aquatic.
So I believe that they're pointing out with the makara and why its station is basically Capricorn, is this relationship with much about the nakshatras, the lunar mansions.
Yeah, they're like the wives of Chandra.
Yeah, and then there's a hidden one which is Brahma's nakshatra, and that's the Abhijit nakshatra, and that's why.
Abhijit, like unconquerable, right? Like.
Yes, exactly. It's unconquerable. It can use all the God's powers, every single one of them, right? It can bring it all because it's Brahma and it's really all his manifestation anyways. And it's a polar star rather than being on the ecliptic, the nakshatra, right? And so they say that it's the hinged one. It's the one that sits on the pole and actually holds all the other nakshatras on the ecliptic. And when that moves, that polar star or that line that comes down to that nakshatra, when it moves in the precession of the equinox into the Milky Way, which it now is clicked in, it clicks into where Mula's nakshatra is, which is the root chakra, right? So it's the one that's the lowest and can dive into the deepest, and it's a kind of like a Venus character that rules Mula's station or whatever. And so I see it as that it's showing us symbolically that it's the highest and lowest point connecting together and making that tree of life come back together. The top part of the tree that goes all to the polar, right? Because there's all this polar stuff that's
like
related
the
to
zenith and the nadir.
Yeah.
Like you have Vishnu in the bottom of the universe sleeping, and then like the lotus is going through like the whole universe, and then Brahma's at the top of the universe, like creating.
Exactly.
And then it says, it says here in the next verse, it even says that it describes how like the dolphin has its head pointed downwards towards the center here, and then the constellation, the nakshatras are on its body, and then it says a bunch of these. Let's see. Yeah, it mentions Mula right here, like a Jivati, like the first 3 stars marking the southern route. Mula, Purvashada, and Uttarashada.
Yeah.
You know, and then it also describes this Akasha Ganga. So then the Ganga is also, you know, so there's like the water. So the cosmic Ganga is actually the cosmic waters in which Vishnu is lying in. So like there's water outside the universe, outside of the Brahmanda, like this dark, it's like waters of darkness. Like it's like this describes tamas or like tamasi. Like sometimes Vishnu lying in the bottom of the universe is called tamasi because he's like asleep. Right?
Yes.
But he's also, another one of his names is Ananta, right? So he's also like this multi-headed serpent that you mentioned, who's like sustaining all of the planes, right? And then he's below the 14 planetary system, so to speak. Like you'd also mention like the subterranean heavens, and then below that would be like the hellish plane, like Naraka, and then like Vishnu's even down like below that at like the bottom, like resting on the water. Right. Exactly. But then it's interesting, this verse talks about an Akash Ganga, and then it says something about it just talks about like the gods being situated on the on the body. It says Agni, Indra, Dharma, Iti, like thus all of them, are Puchamule at the base of the tail, right? And then you have Datta Vidatta, so they're like on different like so like the gods are like resting in like different parts of the Lord's body, right?
Yeah, they were geolocating or astrolocating features of different gods, which are just pieces of the ultimate God. And they knew that when certain alignments happen and click into place, certain things would happen, obviously. And so that's what I'm putting together. Obviously this presentation isn't done, and I really just want to get together with people like yourself, Noel, and we can really dive in, because there's lots of stories, there's lots of these nakshatras on the videos that I'm not going to play and everything like that. It gets into the stories of those nakshatras, and those stories actually explain a lot of details to all this, right? So I always suggest people watch those on their own until we can figure out if we can actually play it on here and get into the details of that, because there's lots of stuff that we can get into if I was able to play those videos. Like Brahma had 5 heads, right? There was one that was looking up towards the north, and he started chasing a feminine aspect that he made, which is basically considered one of his daughters, because everything that he makes is his children. So
right.
And she was Buddhi or something, like she was intellect, right? And he needed her, so that's why he started chasing her. And then Ardra got mad about it and then cut off his 5th head and then threw it in a very specific place. And I believe that's like the arm of Orion. Supposedly it's thrown from there or something into the Milky Way area. And I'm trying to kind of figure out what I think exactly that means. I'm pretty sure it means it's the Abhijit nakshatra that was thrown towards the pole, and that the pole is, at a tilt and leaning and pointing towards a certain direction. And we'll get into some details like that. But
Yeah, I'm not so much learned in the Jyotish stuff. I just have like a very like what do you call like table of contents understanding, but
Yeah.
more like understanding of like the cosmogony and everything, like what all the devas, you know,
Yep.
symbolize and represent and all that. I just thought I wanted to like reach out to you and talk about like how the gate there's like, and then it says like in the Devayan like the gates. Like there's a way to get to the sun disk, So I don't know how many days of that the year is that. That's like so half of the month, like out of 6 months, when you have the waxing fortnight, and then like the daytime, so that's like half of the time, right?
Yeah.
Then you have, of course, it's always increasing until you get to the summer solstice, right?
Yep.
Before the the lunar system kicks in. And then what is it? So then, yeah, maybe like a quarter of the year or something. A quarter of the days a year, I guess, and half of the days.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so it's like an eighth of the year it's open. And so it's open like the gates are open eighth of the year. So if you like died at random, like you'd have like a 1 in 8th chance of those gates being open for you, I guess, technically.
Interesting. Yeah, and it'll probably give us some insight on more of a timing feature because, the information that I'm presenting, I'm just saying we're moving into that time. That's what
you're talking about a larger time cycle, like the kalpas or like the there's kalpas,
yeah,
cycles upon cycles and all that.
Yeah, that we're moving into it. Yeah.
So this is coming up as like a longer, like a astrological period, right?
Yeah, and this is why we're having all the issues. So for one, we're having the technological advancement to be able to communicate and decode this stuff because we can all work together across the world, obviously, and dive into this stuff. So I think it's very important that humanity starts looking at these things a lot more and trying to work together to work out some of these coded things in symbology that it was meant for this time period. And it's a warning that we're coming up to a time where it's obviously going to get so dire, the situation, because the fact of the technology, that's the advancements that we have, is going to make it so that it's very easy for us to wipe each other out and very easy for us to have all kinds of things like life extension and all that stuff, where there's individuals, if they just grab onto that, they're not going to want to share it with a lot of people. And so that'll give them incentive to use other weapon. If we allow too much accumulation in any area, like towards the elites, they're going to grab it and they're going to exterminate us and then take it for themselves, right? And if we want to build a world that is more the ideal, we have to start working together, and we have to start really breaking this information down, because I think it was sent down to the masses to use as a weapon to defend themselves against these more dominating sort of energies. Because I don't think Vishnu, or whatever you want to call it, God, intended the outcome to get bad, but it also set it in so if it does get bad, it's going to exterminate itself, in essence, right? And that's further information that I'll get into later. I'm just starting off with like showing that, trying to prove out that we're going into that time period by showing this evidence, and then we can dig into it more. And what I feel, I'm not saying everything that I believe this means. We'll get into that later. I want to prove some things out first.
I've had way weirder presuppositions based on Beetlejuice on this show before. Don't worry. Keep going.
Yeah, we're just starting off here with like some general sketches, and then you can like get tuned in or erase a part or add a part.
Yeah, and that's one of the main things I wanted to like say is like, look, people get locked into these constellations and everything like that's really there. And it's not. There's a reason why they drew it how they did. They connected certain stars.
Actually, something I wanted to comment on last time, but I was kind of holding back in the thought, was that in South America, because you'd mentioned this, it's an important point, that in certain places, I was a Boy Scout in the North America. I learned the stars up here. I got down to South America, and I was like, wait, most of those are gone. That sucks. I have to learn like a whole new set, really, right? But also, it's cool because there's a few that are still there. But also, the native indigenous South American zodiac system is different. It's an inversion. Instead of looking at the lines connecting stars, the tribal system was to look at the space in between the stars, right? That void in between the stars, which is so contextually important if you think about what you're saying about where the arrangement of stars is proportional to where you are and the sun, right, is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
exactly.
certainly the stars are like they're like alive, right? So there's like consciousness and everything. So if you subscribe to that like lens of interpretation, then I guess you are kind of tracking the movements of the gods by tracking the stars. Like it's funny, like people like you've seen the meme where like people are like blaming the planets and like the planets are like looking back at them. But like to like fix that one, I guess we could say like it's not that the planets are causing us to act, but like they're giving us information about how our actions are playing a part in the bigger system. And it's almost like they're giving us warning or letting us know of opportunities rather than like it's their fault. They're just like placeholder, like they're like holding it down. They're like holding them. It's like a big machine in a way that they're sort of like doing their part to uphold it, like dharmas to like uphold. They're upholding this, this rotating disk of stars, right?
Yeah.
But like there can be consulted to like give us information. Like people like blame Saturn, like, oh, my Saturn return, like bad luck, and like my late 20s, I had to wake up. I snapped out of a bunch of like ignorance that I had. It's like, yeah, that's like not Saturn's fault. That's like he's there to help you, but like give you information like, hey, this is, you got to wake up. If you don't pass this test of life, you're gonna be repeating this cycle, with that.
Yeah, exactly. I think everything. So, I kind of think of the planets as just irradiating energy that originally comes from the sun, and the sun is, putting out, but also taking in information before it puts out the new information, the new unraveling, and it gets kicked to the planets, and then these planets, depending on their position and angles to each other, that energy is like, throwing a stone into a pond or whatever, it's radiating out, they're hitting each other, and then it comes to us. And because of all that mathematics of those angles of those energy fields vibrating out and then eventually hitting us, together they make an outcome for us. And then depending on where we're at on the planet and all that different stuff, the influences around us, it's very complex, but that's what they were mapping. That's what they were trying to look at and figure out, like how to predict certain things like your Saturn return and all that stuff, because they saw it over and over again happen. They're like, okay, there's a certain time period as it rotates around you, it comes back to a certain period, because it's going to be the same no matter what. There seems to be something that happens to that individual because now Saturn's back in this position and it's irradiating what, most likely what I can gather is that your experiences got fed back to the sun radiated out, hit the planet Saturn, gave it feedback, and then it sends a message back. It's kind of like walkie-talkies or radios or however you want to, imagine it in your head. But I mean, it could make sense that all these planets are taking in information and then kicking out some sort of judgment, right? Like in Saturn's case, it would be a judgment on you guys, on everyone, right?
Yeah, because he's also like Yamaraj, right? He's the Lord of Death and of like judgment and restraint also, right? Because you're usually being judged because you weren't able to like control yourself or acted out of weakness or like chose the easy path instead of the right path. But also the idea, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of this one, but for the viewers, that the sun is also a symbol of Atma or the self, right? Or even you could say of God, right? Like the sun is like a drop of God, which is like giving us all life. So sometimes the sun's like associated with Indra, or because it's drinking up the waters and showering them down. Or also Indra just means leader of the gods, so it's also associated with Vishnu. So like there's like a microcosm with like us in the sun, and then there's like the macrocosm with like other worlds in relation, to like this the whorl of this galactical lotus.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, it's an initial emanation that kind of starts, you know, existence or manifestation, at least in those areas, right? And there's obviously stars all over, so those are all just different Indras or suns or however you want to think about it. But yeah, just locally.
Yeah, I'm listening. Sorry.
No, I was just thinking, like, you know, locally in our galactic plane, you know, it looks like it's been associated that they kind of think of Vishnu being as that central sun in our galaxy, and then our sun is, yeah, like an Indra.
Or maybe you've heard of Surya Narayan, like Surya Narayan. Have you
Yeah.
heard of
Yeah, Surya, the sun, right?
Suryas? Or like the Gayatri mantra, right? Swarga,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you have like the world, the world is the earth, like Bu, and then you have Bhuva is like the space in between, like
Yep.
where the stars are, and then you have a Swar, or the self, or the sun, like the soul of the universe.
Yeah, and the Boo concept, and you know, Buddha and Booty, and all these are all like,
Well, no, those
also
are two different.
Mercury.
Those are two different verbal roots. Buddha is coming from bod, which means to wake up. So sometimes we've gotten the habit of using the word intellect because of the Indologists. They ascribed, because
Yeah.
there's a sort of a cognitive process that's taking place in being awake, like in the awakened state, as opposed to being asleep. But but bu means to exist, or to be, or to become.
Yeah.
That's a different verbal root. That's grounded in the wife of Vishnu. That's, there's like Shri, Bu, and Nila. There's like three potencies of the Lord.
Yeah.
Bu being like the terrestrial one.
I mean, I get it, but I also believe that there is a connection there that was meant to be, whether they're, you know, there's ways that we wrote things down and how we tracked language and stuff like that.
I'll show you later. I'll show you later the verbal roots for that, so that you'll
yeah.
see. Because they actually, so there's some in Sanskrit, the verbal roots undergo like many stages of modification. Just to like form one word could take like, like 13, 14 sutras. So like make that one word, like every single letter has like sutras like behind it to like arrive. They actually start off at like bod, but then it like weakens and becomes like Buddha, and then it has like a, like the past passive participle suffix, like the awakened one, because he's already awake, but then like boo, like bhu, it's just an entirely different letter. It just sounds similar because we speak English. I can show you another time, like off of.
Yeah.
But there's different verbal roots. They just are close. There could be something in the close, but that would be called, so like in when it comes to like textual interpretation, there's two primary functions of words, and one is etymological and one is conventional. And then that's like what's desirable when it comes to interpretation. But then like as a last resort, one could refer to what's called gauni, or secondary, or based on a quality. And in this case, it would be like shabdartha. It would be like based on the quality of sound, because to us in English, bu and bod sound similar, but actually technically, from the, artha, artha, it would just have a completely different meaning. I can show you some time about like the way that these words are formed in Sanskrit.
Yeah. So what it is, what I'm trying to get at a little bit more is that I believe that everything is meant to be and meant to eventually sound very similar. It was there's something in history, there's something in the changing of things, there's something in how it gets changed into different languages, and then what becomes the most important language and how it ends up being said, that is also meant by God. And so, and then there's details in it, but it's also stuff that I don't even know if I have it in this presentation or another one or whatever. But we'll talk about that more, and why it is that I see that there being maybe more of a connection than most would say that there was supposed to be. At least I think that it was meant to down the line, like everything, the way we've moved forward is all unraveling a certain way for a certain outcome. And without getting into it too deep, we'll go into that some other time, and then share our two different viewpoints on it. We can get into some of the details of why it is that I feel the symbology and other ways of viewing it kind of lend to me believing that there's a closer connection than maybe.
Well, certainly for going forward, when something becomes like, even if something is like not the original formation of something, when people start to create out of a substance or create out of a substance, going forward, sometimes people make those associations. I mean, certainly different sounds create different feelings in us. So there's something to what you're saying there, in terms of the sonorous quality of the ornaments of sound, how the words create feelings within us.
Yeah, we're all God, and everything is being created as we move, as we speak, and as we change things and readjust them. And I feel that there's something in that it's meant to be, right? But I would love to get into the details of what you're talking about, because I don't have that understanding of,
it's just a distinction between shabda and artha, like shabda being the sound of a word and artha being the meanings of words. So because poetry makes use of both, right? Because poetry makes use of the sounds that words have, but it also makes use of the semantics or the meanings of the words.
I find even interesting, I forget what it's called in English, but like two words that are explaining something different but are spelt the same, like lead and lead, right? And tears and tear, right?
Yeah, like a big one that people get wrong in the Sanskrit one is they think that Kali Yuga is Kali Ma, but it's not. There's like a dwarf, like a dark dwarf
LOL
named Kali. Like it's not Kali, but Kali. It's just like, for the Indians, they would never have a problem with this. And then when they hear that we have a problem and we think Kali Yuga is Kali Ma, then they're like, what? Like they don't get it. They're like, it's a totally different word. And I'm like, I'm married to an Indian, so like I'm like, I know to you, they're like, you perceive like the hard I and the hard A, like kal is like time, but like kol, is different. Like to them, it's like totally different. Like there's us and their ahs are just like different letters, but for
and then Kalki and all that stuff, California. I would say that there is a connection between them all. There was at least meant to be nowadays, but I get it. Yeah, that it was never.
Black is there with the ka. Certainly, the first letter ka is.
I like to argue the same as Giant here, though, that like coincidences are just a little bit more than coincidences. There's just, people don't like to admit it, but there's something to that. It's hard not to notice that. I don't know.
Yeah. There's always some sort of
the adequate hermeneutical effort to like actually interpret the because if we're gonna, here's the thing. So like when people do like comparative religions, like they start like blending everything together into like a smoothie. It's like a fruit smoothie. It's all like homogenized. But like if you get more technical or scholarly, what you're actually trying to do is you are trying to dice it up, but not that finely, so that you can still retain some features of the original, so you can track it like across time, so like diachronically. But it is possible to do a synchronic reading after one achieves like the fidelity in like both of the traditions that you're trying to like bring together in dialogue. But there's like diachronic reading, and then there's synchronic reading,
and I believe a lot of the stuff I do is kind of a blending. If you'll notice across the board. And you ever heard of the Medicine Buddha?
Land of the Medicine Buddha in Santa Cruz,
of course.
So the Medicine Buddha, the story behind that Medicine Buddha is that it's a very specific Buddha that is promising to mix the medicine bowl, which is all of us have to mix over time. We get mixed in, and eventually the antidote is made through the mixing of all of our energies over time. So all the evil, good, in between, all that stuff needs to hit off each other, have experiences, so that the ultimate God or Buddha can have that feedback and know how to make that perfect antidote for the end times. And so I believe that's kind of a little bit of why it is that I think these things were meant to be mixed and eventually connected in, and it took time to get there. But you also want to, that's what I say to people, like, we should allow all the original countries to keep their genetics going, and we should have the Americas as the mixing pot, right? like you should always keep the old and you want to keep all that stuff so
Like
it's not
preserves.
yeah, yeah. And then there's a place where you take it and you mix it all together and you see what you can come out with. But let's say it doesn't come out right, then you want to be able to go back to the original ingredients and bring them back in and try again. So I like both ends of that. I definitely believe that like the Southern Indian stuff got preserved, that information, which, you know, thank God. And a lot of stuff, you know, got saved through encoding it and stuff like that. So thank God that we have something from the ancient past to hold on to. So I wouldn't want to, you know.
Yeah, I'm not trying to blend it, but
Yeah.
I think we all should be like ecumenically minded, right? Like who you had someone on Andreas, who was his name? He was kind of he was pretty based actually. The dude with the what's his name, Butler. I like that guy.
DJ Butler, yeah, DJ Butler's great.
I liked his ecumenism, where he's like, you know, like ecumenical could be any tradition, right? Like how good is your, you know, how's your ability to digest other traditions, you know, when they bring new horizons into the picture, you know.
Yeah, that's what us Americans are supposed to be doing, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there should be a comparative religion, or we actually need something better than comparative religion, because you're not just like comparing, but we need like some kind of level of synchronic, but like without the pitfalls of like perennialism. But like the most, here's like for me, like the most like basic links that I can suss out is like you have like a Hura Mazda, right? Like in like the Persian. And it does like an inversion of the Indian thing. So like the devas become the devs, like they're the devils or something. So like it's like a flip. I talked to this Kurdish guy, and he says that actually like the Persian Empire was formed by like a long time ago. At least he's like Kurdish from like the village, like mountain people, like nowhere land. So like not central Iranian Persian Empire. I guess they define themselves as different, but their view was that there was some big clash with like an avatar named Parashuram, and then like some of the kings like fled. And then that this actually formed like the Persian Empire. But there's always been this fight between like these devas and these asura, or the suras and the asura. So like you could see how like if you're on the side of the asura, then you're going to be seeing like these suras or the devas as like inimical. And then so there's like a flip that happens somewhere between like India and Persia, and then like everything like is like a mirrored out like a version. So that's like that's where I think is like a big. I would love to learn like old Persian or Middle Persian, or and then learn some cuneiform or something. But
what I see it as is that there was a conflict, and then where do you start getting the first empires? You start getting it in the Middle East and Persia and stuff like that, media area that they were trying. I feel they were trying to snuff out the truth, right? The good information, the opposing side, you know, like you said, you can choose a side, but the opposing side was trying to make the other side look like they were the bad ones, right? Like I argue that Cain and Abel, that Abel is like a Bell character, and Cain is actually the good guy in the story, and they wanted to flip that on purpose. I think they did a lot of things in our Western Bible and stuff like that that is an obvious flip of the information. So I see it as they were going after these Zoroastrian guys that held the flame of truth, and they were trying to create an empire to go and track them all down and start grabbing them up and taking information from them. And they also wanted the prophets, they wanted the magi and stuff like that to work for them and be able to interact with the gods or God or whatever. And these guys started slowly trying to get away, and then you got the Sarmatians and all this stuff that, you know, start coming out of there, even the Greeks, the ancient Greeks and stuff like that, all trying to fight against this thing that I feel is really the evil side, trying to snuff them out. And so then we have a lot of history to go through in all that area to kind of suss all that out, like who was good, who was bad, who was hiding stuff because they didn't want it getting it snuffed out. So yeah, I think that
it makes you wonder. It really makes you wonder like how many flips occurred, or like what if it was the good guy who realized the evil and he had to like destroy the evil one, but then he became the new evil one? Like how do we know? Yeah, there's a lot. We're almost at this point like in a hall of mirrors trying to like walk backwards like to the entrance, you know? Like
Yeah.
at least that's what started to come to mind when you started to describe that, like who is good and who is.
Yeah, I think there's so I think there's the fallen entities of whatever, right? And they had to go down and go the direction we consider downwards, right? If it was like a cross, upward stayed true to the absolute truth of everything, right? The heavenly and all that stuff, and it's all ethereal. And as you go the opposite way, downwards, you just get more and more material, right? It gets darker, more upside down, like all the opposing things that you can think of from heaven. And I think that's why, as we go back into the cultures, they started digging for gold and gems. And so in those gems and gold, and they say the Nagas run that underworld and all that stuff, right? Is this information that is not really supposed to be known. And
yeah, you were saying last time something about we're gonna have to go down before we can go out. Like we're gonna have to like dig before we can like go outward.
Yeah, I would say you don't want to dig, but we're doing something very similar to that. We're putting together circuit boards and stuff like that can also open up another realm, supposedly. I don't know enough details to be able to prove that out. I'm not knowledgeable really in that sector.
Are you familiar with so you're probably familiar, so about the subterranean planes, about, if you want to look that up in the Vedic stuff anyway, there's the Bilaswargas. If you look for Bilaswargas or like Patala system, there's like 7 of these that they're given description. At least
different
like,
underworlds.
Yeah, there's like 7 of them. They have like different names, like Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Rasatala.
Same with the Egyptians, right? They have the 7 gates of the underworld or whatever, the Book of the Dead.
Okay, there's another cross link now. So I didn't know that. So like, I'm pretty ignorant of the Western stuff. I just went like when I was 19, I just went like super hard into the Eastern, specifically what people Hindu or Dharma, really just like the Vedic Dharma.
Yep. Yeah, and Shesha supposedly is Atlas.
Yeah. Shesha? Right? Well, Shesha holding up all the worlds, right?
Yeah, and so that's like Atlas in the story, and Shesha has the 7 heads, and Atlas has 7 daughters, which are the Pleiades, right? And you only see really the Pleiades when you're facing the nighttime, which, a lot of the ancients, they describe the nighttime as the underworld, right? As a whole, that's considered the underworld. And so I think that they were trying to describe the same thing with that number of 7, and there being 7 underworlds and all that, and these Nagas and stuff being associated. So there's a lot of snakes in.
So there's definitely signs of a cosmopolis. I mean, I know a lot of the archaeologists want to shit on Graham Hancock, but there's definitely some kind of larger cosmopolitan interchange going on.
Naga, please. Oh my god, I was trying so hard not to do that.
Naga joke, Andreas. I see there's something you said. I want to make it.
It's really hard anytime I hear the word Naga because it just seems so racist, right? And just the idea, that like the chief of the Naga's name is Shesha. That just seems like some sort of wasp humor in and of itself. Why? And what does Vishnu do with the Naga? He lies on him. He just literally. This is a representation of consumer capitalism and the socioeconomic status of the persons of color. I mean, clearly
that's Monty Python-esque.
Particularly the color is blue. All right, I'm done.
They're both blue. Vishnu's blue. Shesha's
persons of the blue persuasion. I know, bro. I know. Blues. It's all there. Blues.
Well, how I kind of like to see it is like, it's like black at night and blue in the day, right?
Yeah.
But like you have the starry formation at night, and then you have like the blue heavens in the day, right, with the sun.
Well, I know that there's a big push to talk about, and there's a lot of great evidence for the like lost Jewish tribes in Africa and how they keep pre-6th century temple traditions. But I've also said that I believe there's a connection between the Vedas and the antediluvian period, right? So that the as Giant's been saying, there's an inversion here of Christianity, but even of Judaism and of Semitic, Canaanite traditions. And that inversion shows that there are things that are actually parallels in the East and the Middle East, right? And even therefore the West, because the West is so influenced by the Middle East. But because of that, right? I think you can say that these are kind of, there's some parity to those traditions. We should probably be looking at Hindu influences in Africa at least as much as we're looking at Jewish tribal influences in Africa, right? And I think we see that in Eritrea, we see that in the east of Africa. It's a pretty big influence. I mean, Gandhi lived in India, but he also lived in Africa. So there's definitely crossover there.
And their genetic matches. If you go to Kerala and South India and the Ethiopians, they're almost like the same exact genetics, and they were the Dravidians, right? That's the Dravidian line.
Yeah, and the Dravidians are rather dark, but this is interesting that Africa has parity of culture. This is something I think people don't really anticipate as much, but that there's parity with Hinduism in the Congo and with Pygmy traditions.
I think they also use the word Simha for lion also. So like I think you have Simba, right? Like Simha.
Yeah.
Like this is the same word.
And in Japanese it's Osama, which is interesting too, because it's similar, Sima, Osama.
Like Singapore. Right.
Yeah. And Tamil is the closest language, I think, in the way that it's structured to Japanese. Is that correct? That's what I've heard.
I think it depends, because the Basque language has the exact same grammar, so that's kind of a weird coincidence as well.
You have to take into account the Christian NGOs like acting as some kind of like blender where they're generating new narratives that
this is true. The Jesuits might have
based on a hoax too, like
the way Japanese islanders speak today
in South India. That's not true.
I could easily imagine the Japanese speak a new Japanese than they did since the 15th century, right?
For example,
the Jesuits influenced that.
I want to take a chance to say this though, is that like there's like some so-called shrine of like Saint Thomas in like South India, but like even like the Pope accidentally blew the cover on that one. He's like, oh yeah, Saint Thomas made it as far as Afghanistan, but like if you like look, that there's like so like they're having a hard time converting Hindus like in the early stages to like Christianity, and they like came up with like a hoax and build like a fake Saint Thomas.
I don't know about that. Actually, Saint Thomas. I don't think
there's no record of that shrine up until like
Yeah, I think so. The deal is that the Catholics want to control the narrative of what apostles did, because they don't actually have a legacy that traces back to Jesus. So they have a made up legacy to St. Peter that's not real, and St. Peter was not even the person who's supposed to be in charge, and he never went to Italy, right? But because they lost Constantinople, they lost Istanbul, they have to pretend that all of these things, they're like, oh, this person, this god that you put coins on the mouth of is actually a Saint Christopher. This is Saint Peter. This is Saint whatever. And so when they find, this tradition of people who escaped after the exodus of the fall of the Jerusalem temple, there are definitely Jews that ended up in India. Like, there's no question. There are definitely Jews in Peking, China. There's Uyghurs. There's all over the world. It's crazy to imagine.
South India. I'm sorry.
Like I can go to the rainforest and I can find Cajun Jews. You know what I mean? Like I can go to the depths of Peru, in the deepest part of Iquitos, and you're gonna find, because Jews are migratory tribal people that will go places and will continue to be themselves. So you're gonna find Indian Jews, right? Like and they're gonna have a tradition that's not the same as what the Catholic Church. That's the thing. The Catholic tradition is not the same as St. Thomas. That I agree with you on. No, but there definitely were
there's no evidence for that building and that tomb there past like 100 years or so.
Yeah.
That thing is a hoax.
Of course.
And the reason is you had that, like, people still believe on it. You had another guest on here. I'm not going to call out his name, but we could figure it out. But like that he was like, oh yeah, they say Thomas introduced Bhakti into the Mahabharata. It's like not even a single academic is going to accept that Saint Thomas is there like before the Mahabharata.
Right. That's true.
Like, and actually the Mahabharata dating is getting pushed back even like now, like
right.
another 1,000 years more. They're even
It does get complicated though when you talk about like the new chronology, because the idea that Christ was more like 1,000 years ago than 2,000 years ago, and that a lot of things that we think of as far older are far less old because the British calendar and the Catholics have tried to justify their
that's a point well taken though. Is that it's hard to now, like, because we're in such a hall of mirrors now that people have these narratives, especially like NGOs, of establishing new histories.
Right.
So it's hard to figure out about these different groups of people now. Like it's starting to become more confusing, especially with the internet being like scrubbed and repopulated with like amplified stories, and like it's like history is being created, so to speak, by the victor.
Tragic.
You know? So,
Giant, I'm sorry. That was a random rant. I had to go on. I apologize.
I don't know.
No,
There
that
was
was
something about, but I think that what is it? Oh, the Aryan invasion theory is basically, it's more of a migration than invasion, so to speak. But it's also
British, like the British invasion was the Beatles. Yeah, exactly. Still a psyop.
We got Sir George, Sir Ringo.
Yeah, I would say that the Beatles, their names, I know I've spoken about this with Xirtus before, is they're talking about the scarab beetle, but then they obviously changed it to like the beat of a drum, right? They changed it the way that it's
right. And what's it mean by silver beetle exactly? Because that was the original name,
yeah.
Original name.
And Beetlejuice, right? This Beetlegeist is in the silver side, right?
This this is a straight sync right now.
What's with the silver? I'm not based enough. Tell me about the silver.
So it's the silver gate is on the, west side, I would call it, or the opposing side going away from the galactic center is the silver gate in the Egyptian mythology. And then Golden Gate is going towards the center of the galactic plane. So Betelgeuse, Orion, Taurus and Gemini essentially are on that side.
They're on silver?
They're in the silver gate, yeah.
So you're telling me the Beatles intentionally said they were intending to talk about the silver gate next to Beetle?
I mean, why do you think Led Zeppelin? I mean, all these bands, of course, man.
Trippy, man.
Yeah, and then the Rolling Stones, right? The reason that it's the Rolling Stones is because Jesus rolled a stone out of the way to rise Lazarus out of his tomb.
Also because he thinks of it as an alchemical stone, and like it's like that if you can be like Jesus, and from the perspective of a more Crowleyan level, right?
And the Beatles, right? The scarab beetle rolls this dung ball, which is like a stone, right? And then something comes out of it and rebirths out. It's their babies that they have in it, right? And so there's all this stuff that's embedded, the symbology that's embedded into these stories that was passed down to these groups because they were, created by a secret society that comes off of the time period of Queen Elizabeth and everything, and 007 being John Dee, right? And him getting certain information from this character Athena, which is Sophia, or our future sophistication, or the female that needs to be freed from the underworld, or however you want to, connect it. But telling us that we need to educate the populace to get to a certain period to advance technology and all kinds of things, right? And to head for the West and head for the Americas and keep going until you find California and make a place there. But obviously the Beatles are the English form of that, where it started, and I believe that they're the media companies and everything educated them or control them and have them name themselves this. They probably educate them on it also to understand the meaning behind it all. But
so kind of like how we have like these pop stars who are really just like, there's probably like a team of like 100 people like behind them formulating all of these things for them, and they're like the figurehead. So you're saying that that's going on with the Beatles like a lot.
Well,
that's why it's so well polished, or like with Shakespeare, why it's so.
Yes. So I mean, definitely with the early Beatles, I think, and with in general, like with the Phil Spector wall of sound of the Beatles. But there is something clearly these kids are into alchemical transformation. Like that's a thing that they're clearly into, right? Like you can see it in Paul and Harrison. George obviously he's trying to manifest and be like Albert Pike. Like he's just doing exactly what any British grandfather would do. Is you'd study Indian culture or the native or whatever culture you've colonized and conquered, essentially, and try to like get as much as you can out of it. It's just capitalism. I think that's.
Go back though. I don't know about the 007 John D connection. What did you say there, Giant?
So that's where the moniker for 007 comes from, is John D, and he would write secret papers and put it in specific ink that only the Queen can read, and so she would have to use these spectacles that he created, kind of like the spectacles that are used in National Treasure, and Benjamin Franklin had those glasses, right, that he finds that you can click down different screens on them, different colored screens that you can see different colored ink that you won't be able to see with the naked eye. Dang. So he had a special pair of glasses that he gave to Queen Elizabeth so that she can see the writing in between the lines, right, to read in between the lines. And he would sign it with 007 because it looks like spectacles, two eyes, and then
so those lines right there is writing.
Yeah, you mean in between them?
If you zoom even more, there's writing right there. What is that?
Well, let me go to a video.
That's so far out, man.
So you gotta check out, and God rest his soul, Alexander Woe, who passed away, and we did a great video with him.
I watched this video again a week ago. I was like, I want to see that video again. It's so good.
Yeah, check out some of his work though, because he has really done an epic job of showing how William Cecil helped John Dee kind of exploit the work of Edward de Vere to make Shakespeare, and that everywhere along the way. Let's see, where's the incalculable genius of John Dee? This video, I think, will tell you so many things about how his encryption works, right? And it's just really practical stuff. You know, like you can, and not only that, he did this because he felt like it was an esoteric, magical thing that was the true language of God, right? The synchronicity of everything else. And most of what we understand, like the way we speak today, English, is so much because of John Dee. It's crazy. It's crazy to imagine that this language is basically a meticulous calculation of what this guy thinks angels are speaking, right? That's English, English, like the idea that we're speaking like the angels. I mean, this is all because of this James Bond character. Absolutely.
And now we have Booty and Boaty, right? And all that.
I mean, today when we say James Bond, we're thinking more of the Serbian spy,
James Buddha.
Yeah,
we have a James Buddha around here somewhere.
But Dusko Popov was kind of a psychopathic Yugoslavian Serb who we associate with the James Bond character more than we do with John Dee. But John Dee is the actual spy and esotericist for the Queen, and he deserves to be probably acknowledged as such.
007.
So he's like a proto 007. Do you know how they came up with that?
Well, no. He actually, that's what I'm trying to say. Like 007 was his number, right? The way that 426624 was the number for De Vere. 1947, all these numbers were very important, right? So he would always signal that he did something with a 007, right? That was his number. I think, who was 006? Do you remember, Giant?
No, I don't know, but I know there was a lot of them working together during this time, and it was all connected to Queen Elizabeth. Every single one.
I feel like Cecil might have been 003. I forget the whole thing, but so it's worth.
Okay, so the personality of Shakespeare was created in company by the John
Shakespeare Company
and Cecil.
Yeah. And with the words of Edward de Vere, and so a lot of it's edited
into and published under the pseudonym of Shakespeare.
Right. Yeah. Although Shakespeare also is an actor that they had and they paid to play for life this character.
Well, his name was William, but he didn't have the last name Shakespeare. Shakespeare is a symbolic moniker that's created from Athena, which
shaking the spear at your enemies. Pitchfork would have been a good name too. We could have easily had. Polly Pitchfork could have written all of the plays, you know.
Wait, finish the sentence. What's she shaking? What is Athena shaking the spear at?
At her enemies, but in defense. She's a defensive. You know.
She's in the right.
Liberty against injustice, right? But also, it's because Lady Liberty represents the people. It's just like the magic flute thing. It's Austria, right? So it's the entire people are shaking their pitchforks. That is Lady Liberty shaking her spear,
Yeah.
right? At the celestial bureaucracy, which is represented by the people that can predict the floods and are trying to take care of you. If they can't take care of you. They can't predict the weather. They're not really in charge.
So that's why they're trying to control it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, then wait. What is the deal then with Cain? You mentioned something. You had a theory of like there's a flippening like of Cain.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you know, God.
Think about the story, right? Like,
yeah, God intended us like, you know, Shiva is the protector of animals, right? And he's been turned into a bad guy. He's not a bad guy if you really read the stories of Shiva, right? Kali is
righteous.
It's like Odin or something, yeah.
Kali's also righteous. Kali's the slayer of demons.
Exactly. That's what they always try to lie to us and try to make it out like Kali was some, like those are heads of humans and she's evil, eating humans or something and drinking their blood. But no, she had to do that because a demon kept on growing more heads, and every time his blood would drop, that another demon would grow. So she had to catch all that, drink the blood to save us, and that's all the heads that she had to cut off. And she figured it out over time how to kill this demon. And so she's a manifestation of you know, a righteous judgment or a cleansing of
it's like God the
force.
She's the God the mother as like the demon slayer. Like if mom's gonna like, it's like Mama Bear.
Yeah, exactly.
Is Mama Bear.
Yeah, Mother Nature, whatever you want to call it. When it does a cleansing, when it does something, it's doing it because it's part of nature. We got to understand nature a little bit better. But anyways, so Cain is very similar to Shiva in, you know, he's the agricultural, he's connected to agriculture and the protector of animals. So, you know, if I take it more literally that God said, thou shalt not kill, right? That it's not saying you should not murder another human. It's saying you should not kill at all. Killing is not necessary. Let things die in their natural form. You shouldn't be the one that thinks that you're the judge of others, unless obviously it's a killer. You should only kill killers. You should only kill murderers, right?
Not like the tolerance paradox expires once somebody attacks, right?
Yes, because you lose your rights. We do that here in America, right? You have inalienable rights, but how are they alienable? Is when how do you put a lien on that? Is when someone violates other people's rights, then you get yours taken away. And this is why there was duels, all kinds of stuff through history. And you know, humanity used to understand these rules a little bit more dynamically. They've lost it now. So once something is a violator, it is no longer considered to have rights, and therefore you're not actually killing it. You're putting it out of its misery and you're saving others. You got to look at it in an opposing way. So I argue that Cain saw a killer, which was his brother, murdering animals, and he stepped in and had to get rid of his brother because of that. That wasn't supposed to be. It was no good. But they try to make it out like, oh, it was a better sacrifice to God. That thing that they call a God and that they've tried to trick us in, you know, Christianity or, you know, whatever you want to call it. I don't even want to use their name, but they've obviously learned how to invoke a demon. I think this connects back to, you know, even the Persian Empire and all this stuff. These older empires learn how to interact with the demonic forces, and it gave them ways to manipulate humanity, but it wants sacrifices, it wants death, it wants you to oppose what God's rules are. And so I feel that true story should be told in the opposite, that Cain is actually stepping up and doing a righteous duty like Shiva would, right?
Do you know anything about, is there any like textual examples of this kind of interpretation, like in any like the rabbinical or like midrash or any?
You know, fun fact. I'm actually
stuff before. Maybe
I'm having Jonah Barnes on, I think later tonight, if not tomorrow, and he just wrote The Key and the Keystone, and it's all about this whole idea that basically it shows all the apocrypha. And so in the like so many books in the Apocrypha, as well as Muslim and different interpretations of these stories. And there's a lot of weird interpretations that would have gotten you killed by the Catholic Church, and they changed the word heretic to basically mean blasphemy, when originally it was just different schools of thought, right? So we'll get into that, I think,
like
later.
heterodox or something.
Yeah, but there's just hundreds of different or thousands of different interpretations of
Yeah,
these
like
books.
Irenaeus. What do you write on the heresy?
For instance, the idea that when Joseph is kidnapped and sold into slavery, in many interpretations, the father says, "Oh, amazing that he left no shred, and there's just like the coat isn't ripped, but he just took my son." So the father knows that his son hasn't actually been killed, and that his sons have done this. That's a very common Jewish interpretation, but that's not the way Christians want to interpret it. They're supposed to think that the father is surprised, like dramatically, theatrically, when he finds out his son is born or is still alive. So, the same thing with every, the sacrifice of the son. The idea of Isaac being sacrificed by Abraham, and then the father's kept from doing it by God, who made him try to do it in the first place. Other interpretations show that Lucifer is tempting him to sacrifice his son, and that God stops him from doing it, right?
Wow.
Because he needs to know that it's all a ruse, and you need to shake the hand of God, to shake the hand of angels and things like that, to know that they're not just Lucifer trying to manipulate you, whispering in your ears, because Lucifer has no power except for if he can get you to do things. That's one of the older interpretations. But the Jews didn't like Lucifer. They didn't like the idea of having an evil character during the Deuteronomist period. So, I mean, there's just like no singular interpretation is kind of the point. And all of those things are up for grabs. And whether or not they castrated Joseph, or whether or not Cain and Abel, whether or not it was better to be vegetarian. It's a huge thing in the Jewish tradition to be vegetarian. It's a big part of the Bible that the Jews go into Babylon and they show them that they're healthier and stronger by being vegetarian. That's a major part of the Bible. But they don't, this isn't something that they talk about nearly as much, because the Cohen priesthood has always pushed sacrifices and putting chickens over your head and all this other stuff, right? Which is not in the pre-Deuteronomist stuff. All right, so just
a lot of information like that across all the ancient, spiritual groups. That a lot of it was just vegetarian. I mean,
there's a bummer if you like to eat cow, but yeah, Jesus probably didn't eat cow. Just
so there's a lot of there's a lot of edits and flips of the script, and like a memory loss. Like, for example, like I can. Because I know all of the different Hare Krishna groups and all the the ones that are outside of that, I know the broader umbrella, and I can trace all of the current modern stuff.
I can name 100 American Protestant sects.
I can guarantee you that in a generation or two, nobody will have any idea that what I know about all the history of stuff that's happened in the last 100 years regarding Vaishnavism coming to the U.S. and stuff.
Interesting.
But it'll all be forgotten, and I bet you I'm already seeing some sort of schismatic kind of things becoming problematic. I can imagine people just making stuff up to justify whatever, just to
easily
group integrity or something, groupthink, so how many flips of the script have happened? But I think it seems like the oldest flip of the script is between the Zoroastrians and the Vedic, where you have the Asuras are the good guys, and then the Vedas are the bad guys. That seems to be at the, you have some kind of I don't know, Jacob's ladder going on or something.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was distorted over time too, as the Persian Empire got distorted, up to Xerxes, and they were obviously doing a lot of demonic stuff, right? So it most likely was probably pretty similar and didn't get flipped right away, and then they started going after those guys that were holding that truth, and they at certain points in time, a lot of this Jason Reza Giorgiani, you guys have heard of him before, correct?
Of course, yeah. I know.
Yeah, he goes into a lot of the details of how over time these different groups were either forced to be Muslims down the line, all this stuff. Manichaeism.
Oh, I think I know this guy.
Jason Giorgiani is he's one of the
Persian scholar.
He's a Persian scholar. Yeah.
I think I've seen a couple videos of him.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so he does pretty good at really going into a lot of the details of how different parts, and then these groups, as they move more west, east and north away from the Persian Empire, and how they were tracked down and constantly, looked for, and a lot of wars, a lot of stuff happened, right? I believe Darius or Xerxes, one of them was assassinated by one of the Sarmatians, or the Amazon women, as far as I remember. Obviously, we'd probably need to have Jason on to get into those real details, but from what I remember, it seems very much that they were constantly infiltrated, and just like it is still to this day, I think every organization and religion and everything is constantly getting infiltrated one way or another, and different tactics are used to snuff out the truth, or try to.
Just like bad students who like give up the path but like remain in like administrative positions, like jamming up the traffic, creating chaos and delay.
Yeah, they give into the temptations of the devil one way or another. It works on our psychology and stuff like that. If we feel that we can't survive, we're going to do whatever it takes to survive, and that will be, a lot of people will sell their soul, or sell out the truth, or sell out the mission of existence itself, right? Because I feel that's what's happening, is that's why we have to get sophistication over time, is that a lot of people have to fail, and other people have to see the failures or experience it or whatever, and it might have to happen many, 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 many times over, obviously, because we've had a long history before we can get it correct. And it's easy to think of yourself in those situations. It's very hard to lay down your life for the bigger mission. And there has been a lot of humans that have laid down their life for the bigger mission, right? I mean, Jesus is just a story, but there's a lot of real people in history that said, no, I'm not going to back down. You know what I mean? It's not worth it. I'm going to die no matter what. I'm at least die for a good reason. And a lot of them, I believe, have even died without being a part of history. We'll probably never know about them, but they made sure that they kept that secret that was necessary, because it needed to be passed down to humanity once we were able to really put up a fight against the type of energy that we're going to have to all put in effort to fight here soon, I think, right? If you think of it, yeah.
I'm listening. What do you think about, like, did you ever see that movie? Was it like Jet Li or something, like Hero? It's like
I love Hero. I just downloaded it.
Kind of a little bit has like a fascist sort of.
I know it's totally fascist, because it's about how China destroys every culture and genocides all of its people, right? In order to create this new monolithic Han PRC, but it's metaphored by how Shin created his empire. It's like the people's empire. It's so Chinese fascistic, but how they're just like,
the hero
okay,
gets vilified, right? Like the hero ends up being written as the villain, right?
He is a villain, but what he's they're everyone. He's actually honorable, because he's sacrificing everything he has and everything with the intention of saving the one letter, the letter for the symbol for the word hero. This is the whole point of everything. It's like, look, if you're going to destroy my culture, rape my women, and build your new world order, I want this symbol to remain in the the intellectual property of the commons. I want it, when people say the word hero, I want them to think of this, right? I think that's kind of interesting. That's like, if there's one thing that I want to save, one thing that my life is worth, one thing that not just my life is worth, but all of the people who lived and died for generations, thousands of years, for me to be here. I want this saved.
And the hero is the hybrid, right? Etymologically, I believe there's a connection between like the word giant, hybrid, and hero, right? Where it's a mixture of a person, and in the Asian culture, a big one of these major heroes that they keep recycling and stuff is the monkey king, the monkey god, right? And this is also in the Hindu, which is Hanuman, right? And then there's a monkey god even in Central America that they found the temple to, which they're finding a lot of stuff that's very connected to the Hindu culture in the Americas.
I mean,
as a
clearly
whole.
monkeys are doing all right if they're crossing land bridges and getting across seas, you know?
You probably
Yeah,
know
and it's not a
that
pure monkey; it's a
Hanuman
mixed
is
monkey.
Shiva, right?
What's that?
You probably already know Hanuman is Shiva, right? You know, he's the Rudra.
Yeah, exactly. It's a
That's what-
representation of Shiva, and I think that's they're embedding this stuff. So there's the straight across story, right, that you get, but when you look at all these cultures and how they have very similar stories with this character, that I'm also putting together a presentation showing that this character that is Hanuman, which can be grow to a very large size and then shrink down to a very small size. Is also throughout the Asias in a different form or name, and it's just basically this monkey king, monkey god thing, and it even tricks Buddha, or I think Buddha was the only one that can get him under. He's known as kind of a trickster, right? So there's this trickster element to it, but it's also I believe that the evidence shows that King Kong, Godzilla, the Nagas, dragons, leprechauns, werewolves, tons and tons of these characters across the board are all the same thing, and that it's this chimera character that can change shape and do different things, and it's really the hero, and this existence is trying to get us to be able to take on many different forms, so become a hybrid of sorts, right? This chimera, but naturally mixed together, and then you got all these elements. And so they show it in like these female characters that they show a lot, like on the Capitol building and everything. It's multiracial feminine character, but it's also a warrior, so it's like kind of masculine feminine, and then it has all these different weapons and all these different shields and stuff. And this is why they show the Hindu gods and everything with multiple arms and multiple weapons and everything. It's very dynamic, sophisticated character that they're talking about one way or another, whether they show it in a feminine or a masculine form. It's the same thing over and over and over again. They're just telling you what it is in all the different ways, because God has whatever, a million names or whatever, right? So it's showing you that God has a million shapes.
Yeah, in the Veda it says that every name is the name of God.
Yeah, and this is
like
the Abhijit, right?
Om Tat Sat, right there. You have like the seed. You have like demonstrative pronoun that, right? And then that is truth. So if that, because it's it's definite, but like Om is containing also, that's indefinite. So you have all possible words, denoting and connoting God, right?
Yeah, and God will win no matter what. So whatever God wants, that's why I don't even question. Obviously everybody questions no matter what. I mean, I can say that I don't even question anything about this existence or whatever, but when I'm in myself and I'm feeling bad for myself or my situation or whatever, I there's always like an internal, like, why is this got to be, even just like stubbing your toe or whatever. But ultimately I try to stay a little bit stoic and understand that, I can't understand what it is that God is doing ultimately. I can only hope to try to understand this existence and understand what God is trying to get out of it. But everything is God, so we really shouldn't question any of the dynamics. It's all unfolding to the sophistication that it wants out of this world. It's trying to get to something. I believe it's trying to get more dynamic. It's trying to get more precise and have more experiences, more dynamic experiences, longer existence for us, and more harmony, right? It's trying to perfect everything. And so I don't see it as, trying to destroy us, but I think it has it set in. And Jason Reza Georgiani talks about this Promethean aspect to it, is that if we don't get it right, it will destroy itself. And then
God is also, what is this? Andantarastara Paramanu Chayantarastam. He's situated in every atom and every heart. But that also means he's situated in the heart of, people who are like inimical to us.
Yeah.
So he's on everyone's side. But like, yeah, I think sometimes when like, I'm like, why am I born in a world that I feel very different from? It's like, there has to be a room for like naughty children, I guess. So like maybe, or like you could even divide up time, like, you know, like why am I born in this time? Like why am I thrown? As if like Heidegger's being thrown, right? Like
Yeah.
you're being thrown, like you have an inertia to you, or your karma or whatever. But you know, then maybe I should do some introspection and, you know, consider what is in me that is like that which is in them, who I have friction with, right?
Well, we must be in friction no matter what. That's a very important part of, like, we would not progress without the other side. So yeah, in a lot of ways I talk about it like as an enemy in a way like that. But I also know that it needs to exist, and it needs to put pressures on us so that we move. If not, we get too comfortable, we will just settle. We don't like to cause waves. They do. They like archetypes because they'll rise to the top of those bubbles, and they'll take advantage of it. And that's just a dominant character, and it's in all of us a little bit here and there and all that stuff. But there's obviously entities in this world, what do you want to call them, just like spiritual forms that are demonic and stuff like that. But their job specifically, then they're God too, their job is to get us to figure out what it's going to trick us, it's going to pressure us, it's going to dominate us, it's going to do all this stuff. And not until we figure out how to not allow it to do that, we'll ever give up doing it. That's just its nature, you know. So it's up to us if we want to defend against that and not have a world that is dominated by that. But there'll always be elements of, you know, pieces of that energy in this world, because it causes movement, right? It's a little bit of the Agni or whatever, right?
The
It's the fire.
impelling force, like your samskaras of your karma are like impelling you forward to future, to like they become memories, and then the memories, you know, impel the karma and future actions, you know. But you have they're really just like opportunities. You don't have to like act upon your impulses, you know. Or you could instill, like through like yoga processes or various traditions, you can instill other kinds of habits and impressions that are divine or sacrificial, like where you're giving something of yourself to uphold the cosmic order, you know.
You can sacrifice eating here, and you know what I mean, we're working out, like all those things are generally in that nature. If we divided that up more evenly and we did it wisely, we could make sure that there's equal amounts of both energies, just not so polarized and extreme and in one area and just causing vacuums, because it's so heavy, it pulls down on the fabric of space and starts bringing everything into it, and it just starts eating it up, right? We're trying to keep things so that it's more evenly dispersed and used wisely, and then, you know, subdued very easily. We don't let it get out of control because we put in parameters that make it so that it can't get out of control. We are sharing information about the dynamics of this existence, which we are supposed to be doing, because we come in, we don't know anything, and something else teaches us. The world teaches us, right? Then this is different humans keeping up this information. We're supposed to be sharing that dynamic information so that we can all uphold a more perfect form of the balance between those, you know, these dynamics in this world. And that's what I believe is a true utopia or paradise. It's never going to be without death or without, you know, negativity or whatever.
I think there is planes without that. There are planes that where there is no death, where there is no
just not this existence.
At least
right?
according to it's not this existence, but at least according to the Vedic tradition, if you subscribe to that, is that
possibly
most of the souls are actually not bound in the material world, even though you have like an infinite number of souls, like always filling the slots in the material world, to keep the samsara running. There's like an even more greater infinite souls in the liberated state than there are here. This is considered to be like a corner or something, like a dark corner. It's just one potency out of other potencies, you know, to be like contingent upon other contingencies instead of being free, like to be a free agent, so to speak, or have agentive force, like actual agentive force, instead of like having it mediated by the material, you know, parameters.
Yeah, this is like coexistence. So it's a very specific type of existence that obviously just can get a lot better. And so I think that's part of the duty of this existence, is that we're supposed to make it as dynamic as possible, as sophisticated as possible. right? And there's so much more that we can add on and do that's beyond just getting things more balanced out. Once we get it more balanced out, then from there, you know, we can create very quickly, you know, within this existence. It'll be a fun place. Let's put it that way. It's very rough because we're allowing the energies to get too far out of whack. You know what I mean? We're giving too much energy up to it. Like, I don't believe that anybody should be owning over a certain amount. There's nothing, there's no argument anybody's ever going to convince me that you can just keep on owning stuff, because that's just a vacuum. It's the same
like
sort of
BlackRock gonna own all the proper land or something. It just seems like, you know, come on.
It's outrageous.
It's a little bit stupid. You know, an interesting thing though is, you know, and then when it tilted all the way to the other direction, so like Kali is going to destroy every last demon, you know, and then Shiva stops her, like throwing himself in her path to like, so that she puts her foot on him, and like the Shakti goes back into him, so that settles down and becomes Shanti again.
And I see that as that she was going to destroy that specific demon, but she was starting to she wasn't cooling down, and so she was going to
destroy every last one,
everything.
So he's more like a it's weird. He's like the good probation officer, if there ever was such a thing, who's like actually trying to get your like sentence shortened and like get you on the right path and like get you all like the tricks of the trade to like get out, you know.
That's why I'd say interesting to even think about what we see as the devil. Like, I don't see the devil as the same thing as Lucifer or any of that stuff, or Satan, right? So I guess the word, I don't know whatever word you want to use for it, but there is a character that's in the underworld that's actually, like what you just said, is like a warden of a prison and is keeping those bad spirits down there and not letting them come out, right? And so that character gets mixed in with Lucifer. And
the word Durga means prison, actually. It means fortress or citadel or prison. Durga, difficult from the root dur, and ga, like going, gamyati, like so like that which is difficult to escape or to pass through. So the Maya, like the personified material energy, or like Durga, or the external, that which is outside of God, the external potency of, or like the Bahir Shakti or external potency of Vishnu is actually a prison, but it's more like the Matrix, right? Like you could even be in like heaven and you're still in the prison, but you got golden chains. You know, this was like different levels, you know?
Yeah, and I would think of quarantine in a way, right? Like this place could be, you know, I mean, let's say even a prison, an idea. Right. If you give them enough tools and everything, they could turn it into somewhat of a paradise if that was allowed or whatever. But I don't know. I wouldn't consider where we're at the lowest form of the underworld or anything like that. So I wouldn't really consider it a prison. But because we are allowing this dream to turn into a nightmare, it's becoming very prison-like. And it's going to probably get worse and worse if we don't do something about it. But obviously, this place can be very beautiful and an awesome experience for everybody, and it wouldn't be such a prison. But I think that because we're so close to the underworld where the sickness is, and it's now seeped up to the surface, that now we need to be quarantined. We're not allowed back. It's just a way of thinking about it. Like, we can't go to God anymore. We can't go to heaven. We can't interact because we'll bring the disease up to there, right? And that's where the blueprint of heaven is.
Maybe. I don't know.
I gotta say that Jeremy Fawcett is super base for sending $20 super chat. That's pretty rad.
Oh man, nice. Thank you, bro.
Crabs keep evolving. Carcinization has occurred in more than 5 groups of decapod crustaceans. Crabs take the stage, it's been observed. Evolving into crabs like humans into nations. Thank you.
You gotta make a cartoon, bro.
I know, I've been thinking about it. All right, sorry.
Who made that?
Who is he? Who is he? What's his name? How do we get him in bed with us?
Right. Okay, going back to the topic though, I can see what you're saying. Like you don't want to track your muddy shoes into the house of heaven. But from another aspect, it's also been analogous to light. Like when you turn on the light, it eradicates the darkness. So it's not like it's not like I could throw a football at the sun, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like some certain things I don't think can become contaminated. Like,
well, just yeah, I think it's impossible also, but right, like you would never be in any form that is suitable to go there anyways, right? There's some however you want to
your
imagine.
karma, like you will die in such a way that you wouldn't be able to walk up the Devayan anyway. You'll die in the nighttime on the southern ascent of the.
Yeah, there's only a certain way back to there, right? And then I think what we're doing here, you know, there's no way to prove it out that we've chosen to be here and that we want to reincarnate and everything, but I would argue we probably do.
No,
and we're trying to perfect it.
The theory is you're making your next body. You're already choosing. When you have a human body, you're already creating your future body with your actions now. Like your new body, you're in this body right now, generating karmas, and that those karmas they become something called the purva, which is like a unprecedented like manifestation of energy gets stored, you know, in the chitta or whatever. But it comes to fructification in the next deha or body. So like you're actually creating your next body right now. We are choosing our next body right now. It's not that like it's not like I die and now I'm gonna like, okay, so here's your options. Like, what do you want to do? It's like you already are doing that now. Like death is.
Yep. Yeah, we've originally chosen to be here, and this is what I always tell people: is how do you know something was meant to be? What's the one way you know that something was meant to be? Because it is. It happened. It happened. So that's the only way, right? I mean, we're here.
In past tense. So, we gotta be careful about is-ought fallacy, though, also, right? Because then you end up like justifying.
Calvinism.
Calvinism. Calvinism.
I mean, it's a slippery slope. Once you justify the Holocaust, then you justify Calvinism. It's like the next step.
Calvinism is potentially worse.
Yeah.
You know,
potentially. That's exactly the
Well, God is then just damning, you know, like large swaths of people.
One is the historical anecdote at this point. The other is a potentiality. That's exactly the point. Like if you ideologically accept that evil things are meant to happen because God just wants them to happen, which is not exactly the way the Gita puts it. It's not quite God's not just completely out of pure amusement destroying things.
Krishna tried to prevent the Mahabharat war on like numerous occasions,
right?
Like, even acting as like a menial like envoy, like a
hugely important.
Start the war, it won't work. Like,
how can I reach these kids? That was basically Krishna the whole time.
You want to get to the end, right? It's like that's the whole purpose is to really there's a mission. And so I think a lot of these characters or manifestations or pieces don't know the whole story or the whole way. And that's something that God is either already known ahead of time or is figuring out as we go. And it needs us to act in certain ways and cause interactions. And then from those outcomes, it has reactions to it, right? And so that's how you get to a more perfect place. It's going to take time. And you see it in a lot of these characters, whether they existed or not, saying things like that, like, you know, basically not telling the followers when it is, but saying it'll happen soon, eventually, or whatever. Kind of, we need to be put on that it can possibly happen in our lifetime over and over again, so that we keep just living. If not,
it certainly is happening for some, right? Like some people are undergoing like states of destruction and despair and like annihilation. So there are like annihilations happening, you know, like over, like in like the land,
the microcosm,
Ukraine, something. Here's a little bit of tech from the Vedic stuff that actually kind of deals with like God's foresight pretty well. And that's, he has a potency called Yoga Maya, or which allows him to forget. It's like he hands over his ability to remember that he's God to like a potency, and then the potency is like trustworthy, and it will just at the appropriate time, like in the play, will like oh yeah, you're God, so like wake back up for a second, and then it like take it back away from him, so like he goes to like the experience with us, you know. So there's actually like potency of the omnipotent that can be delegated to do like casting, directing, like generate the play or like the production, you know. So he doesn't have to know. He can know, but he is chooses not to know. only that he needs to know for like less important purposes, but he doesn't need to know for the big purpose, which is interesting. And then the one who actually is doing the knowing is like more like a consultant. Like, I only call this person in like when it's necessary. You know?
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree that they're and I mean, I guess that a lot of the manifestations are like, you know, Vishnu manifestations, right? Incarnations that in certain ways forgot. And
well, he experiences suffering. He experiences like massive suffering like that, but like, you know, but then he also, you know, experiences wisdom beyond that, you know.
Absolutely.
It's not like he's incapable of understanding like what we're suffering from, you know. Like, he also experiences it. Actually, if he's in everyone's heart, he's also experiencing the suffering that we're experiencing, but he's able to like remain steady, you know.
The necessary component to really having understanding of why the choices do get made in these different ways, to have to experience life and existence along with other elements of yourself that are going through the program and the cycles and the mixture and that medicine jar, that mixing pot, right? So you got to jump in every once in a while and feel what it feels like to get mixed up with the rest of us, which is still itself, right?
But like, being steady is kind of like a service that he's performing for us. So like, eventually the buck does stop with God. Like the gods can resort to God, like when there's like a demon that's too big.
The buck stops with God.
Right. Well, think about it, right? Like, so if God, let's say he suspends his godhood so that he can just be a person playing with us.
Can we get T-shirts to say the bhakti stops here? Because that'd be really.
Actually, there's some statements in the Shastra that says he becomes a debtor, or he becomes over. Actually, that's the only thing that can overcome God, or that's like the ultimate magic. Or there's something. So in black magic, in the Indian black magic, one of the powers is called Vashikaran, like the ability to. Vashi means to like dwell, so like to basically like possess another person. Karan means just to cause like the controlling of another person. But like that's the only thing that works on God is love. Like he actually becomes like very easily controlled by that. But it's kind of hard to love God sometimes, because you know, he will consume the whole thing, and then it's like you know, there's always more, you know. So like what I was saying, when the buck stops with him, like he'll suspend his godhood just to be the person, right? But then like if the situation gets out of hand, he can revert back to like his potency will be like, okay, the situation's gotten out of hand. Now you're like, you have to stop playing for a second. Here you do this, do some dharma, do some duty to like deliver, what I say, dharma sam stapanartaya, to reestablish the meaning of dharma, you know. So it's not like I don't think he necessarily wants to know the future. Like, it's all sort of like he's able to, but he has the ability to like delegate, which sounds kind of like funny. Like, it sounds like very like middle management, like, or he's doing delegation work. But I would say, like, because then some people could say, well, God doesn't really suffer then, because, you know, like, he can get out of it.
I feel like God can choose to suffer or not, and that's kind of the interesting thing.
No, but here's what's more interesting. He's giving up even that choice to suffer or not to the potency, which is telling him, now you will remember, now you will suffer.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. There's a celestial process that has to happen.
That's the female, that's Shakti, Leela Shakti. So there's like a play, like a divine play. So like the material world, like in the highest analysis, is considered to be like a sport or like a play of the Lord, where he enlightens souls through this process, through the long process, instead of just generating them in the already pre-enlightened state. Like, most of the souls are just generated as already enlightened, you know, or they're always like permanently existing in his play outside of like any material limitations or bondage. But then like some are being going through like the long process of seeing the entire problem and finally coming to like an apotheosis, right?
Yep. He needs characters everywhere. He needs to play the character of all different aspects, right? Because every part of it is necessary in this huge machine of a world that it is, right?
Yeah, there's two souls in the body. One is our soul and one is his, you know. But he does suffer. Actually, he suffers infinitely, and essentially. So I know sometimes people will be like, oh, God's not suffering. It's not like Jesus on the cross, who's like crying out in pain, saying, have you abandoned me? you'll see Ram like that too. Like Ram is like lost Sita and has lost his wife. I mean, he's getting like his wife's kidnapped, you know, like it's like almost like worse than death. Like wife's kidnapped, you know, and he's like chasing after, and he's completely like losing his shit. And like the potency is not coming to relieve him, to remind him you're God. Like he's going through that, like he's going through it, you know.
You can't have ups without the downs, right? We have to experience all sorts of tragedy and stuff like that to really appreciate, you know, the good side of things, or it just becomes too bland. Life, you know, it needs to have those things, or at least at some point. Doesn't mean that it always has to be very extreme, but I think at least God wants to feel those extremes at first, and then they get mellow as it refines itself.
Well, imagine, if you will, like a spiritual world that's dynamic. Sometimes we think of like, if you reach the spiritual world, it'll be like a throne room where all of the angels just sing constantly in the glory, basking in the the omnibus, right?
Yeah.
But like there, imagine, if you will, like even more dynamism there, but it's the opposite. Instead of being a destructive dynamism, it's like a growth dynamism.
You mean just living in a spiritual?
Yeah, it's not bland at all. There's nothing bland. It's actually far less bland than all the violence we experience here. But it's a different, it's totally different structure of dynamism. You know? Yeah. Like here, everything's like decaying, but like there, everything's like blooming.
Yeah, you're saying it as just a possibility that it just has, it's kind of like maybe a psychedelic trip where all the colors and everything are changing all the time, and all these new faces and shapes and thoughts and everything are just like kind of, you can be kind of in ecstasy.
There's a joy in the service of the Lord, right? Like there's like like, oh, the Lord's going to, you know, I mean, he's very clever. So like if he's going to dance and everybody's going to join in on the dance, then it might be some dance like the likes of which even kings and queens have never seen, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not just, I don't know. Sometimes we think that there has to be suffering for there to be existence or to be a full palette. But at least from what I've read in the text, that there is dynamism in the spiritual world, but it's and there's even more dynamism. It's just it's sort of hard to understand, because one of the ways we deal with the suffering here is to sort of include it so we can surpass it. But there, it's like it's a lesser ingredient. It's like if you put too much salt in the food, it would like actually be lesser quality food.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I can imagine it, but the thing is that I just don't feel that this existence that we're in is supposed to be that. But I can imagine that there's other realms of existence, however you want to phrase that, you know. But in this reality, the way that it is, I feel that you need something that is, you know, causing conflict with it in a way, or something, or contrasting, right? And then you can get that very smoothed out. I can imagine that here, but I couldn't see that it would, like, people get bored with just having anything too much, you know, in this existence, at least the way that our feelings and our hormones are built in and all that stuff. So I can imagine that existing in a spiritual dynamic, but not with a body that has hormones and we receptors and nerve endings and all that stuff. Like this place needs some suffering, but yeah, there could be in a spiritual realm a place.
I think these bodies are built for a degree of pain, so they like almost demand it. Like if the relationship is too peaceful, one person will start quarreling or something. But like how do I say this? So like here's one way you could maybe infer, like when you have a new love, like there's a fresh love in a new relationship, and like mutual infatuation of like expectation of like meeting the person. It's like almost that expectation, even though it's like uncomfortable, like what will happen, you know, there is it's almost higher than like, you know, the consummation where like the dynamism of the relationship has reached to such a level that it must consummate in the bed, you know. Like the leading up to it is almost like superior with the
Yeah.
tension. There could be
A
tension.
foreplay.
There could be tension in love. It need not be like my family got blown to bits in like a drone strike or something.
Yeah.
Like there could be tension in love also. Like there could be dynamism, like people going to meet the Lord, but then like returning to their domicile. You know, like there's always like even standing in the presence of the Lord, maybe you're always feeling like your heart is living outside your body, almost like a self-forgetfulness. Like
Yeah.
your heart's like leaping out of your chest. Like you have children, like when you see your children, it's like your heart is like literally like running around the room. You're like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's more of my soul than even in my body anymore. Like my soul is here. Like,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah. When associating thoughts towards life being great and, you know, contributing to it, fertility, love, all these things that are moving us towards it being more dynamic and everything is great. But it, you know, obviously if it was all that, then we would already be there and we would already got there. And then it would have to be a new challenge, because challenges are very important also. You know, you're going to have to deal with losing all those things that you're so connected to and that you have so much love. Even your children, you know, you may lose them in your lifetime, or you're going to lose them because you're going to die before they do, hopefully, right? Yeah. Or they, you know, for whatever reason don't like you or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of heartbreak and everything in this world. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to drone strikes and stuff like that, like I don't think those things are eventually going to be necessary. I don't think humanity is going to want to, you know, and God is going to want to experience that forever. I just think that God wants to experience everything to learn from it, but ultimately is choosing towards, and we should be choosing towards being beautiful with the ideal of God, or Bhagavan, right? That's what we're heading for, is making everything as beautiful as possible. And beauty is a dynamic word where it's a masculine and feminine sort of thing, right? It has structure, you know, we can see, you know, structural beauty and all kinds of stuff. So
I'll point out something in the word Ananda, you know, like in the beauty, right? So
yeah.
in, you know, the word Ananda actually shares the same verbal root as Ananta, right? It's just a softening of a consonant T into a duh. So like the feeling of that joy is actually Ananta, right? It's actually unlimited joy. So it's not that the dynamisms that are within it are already sufficient, that they don't require like some contingent. So that's why in the Vedanta Sutra it says Ananda Prachodayat. Prachodayat. Wait, no, not Ananda Prachodayat. That's Gayatri. What does it say? Abhyas. Oh, Anandamayo Bhyasat. That thing, that world is made of. Maya here means substance in this instance. The word Maya can also mean substance. The Ananda Maya, that thing which is made out of Ananda, which is made out of joy, is Abhyasat. So it renews. So there's like a profundity of it. Like it's a ever renewing, you know.
Yeah.
It's not
fertile.
Yeah, very, very.
Yep. Yeah. And that's that's really, you know, in my belief system, that's the only thing that actually really is. And, you know, obviously we understand fertility in a lot of ways, and you know, death is necessary for fertility to happen. And it's basically as we are, you know, mixing with a female and having babies, like you're basically setting it, you're saying, look, my life is getting ready to go away, so I need to bring another life in to take my place, right? And, you know, everything has to rot to become fertilizer for plants. You know, it's a dynamic that definitely is, death is needed in this existence to create more fertility. But the most important thing is life continuing, and the reason it needs to continue and needs to focus on love and beauty and stuff like that, because that's what it's creating. It wants to make the most loving and the most beautiful place within this existence. So those are the aims. That's why Bhagavan is called the beautiful one, right?
Well, yeah, Shri means beautiful, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Shriman or Shri. Shriya is the Lakshmi, right?
Yep.
The feet.
Exactly.
The
So that's what we're aiming for, I believe.
I was wondering if you could enlighten me on the lunar mansions, because I was watching your video. You were going on the talking about the. Sorry to change the subject here, but this is one of the things
Oh, no worries.
Because the karmas progress right through the lunar mansions, and I remember reading something like the first lunar mansion is like self, and second one is mother, and then there's like the third one is father, like fourth one is children, and then like fifth is like place or like land, or there's all kinds of things, right? And then like activities, and then like relationships. Yeah. Like, how does that actually work? Like, what is the actual astrological theory of karma? Like, what is the order of the lessons there? Do you
that it's so
I feel like you've studied this more than I have on the karma, the Jyotish and everything.
You know, the guy the videos I was pulling, his name is Vic Takara. I don't know if you know who he is, but
I've seen that guy's face. I may have watched a couple of his videos, but I just haven't had the time to turn myself towards Jyotish yet. I haven't really studied the
astrology. Yeah, he's an interesting dude. You know, well read, with all the Hindu scriptures and stuff like that. A lot of astrology, obviously, but he goes into all of it and reads these stories. But he does a whole, you know, series. He's done it multiple times on the nakshatras and the stories behind them. And from what I can gather, you know, maybe sometime we can have other guests on that are a little bit more in depth with nakshatras. Maybe we can have Vic on. And there's a bunch of other astrologers that I also watch that talk about the nakshatras. There's lots and lots and lots of information, because these astrologers go into this stuff and they're like teaching each other, like, oh, and it's related to this and this and this. So I can't remember everything offhand, but essentially they're the daughters of Daksha, I believe, right? And the only male one is Brahma's nakshatra, and it's to fill in that extra lunar mansion that, you know, happens every once in a while, but it's a secret lunar mansion. But that there was I forget what the god's name is, but he was only interested, it looks like, in Aries nakshatra, the beginning of Aries, basically, right? And that's the
Aries begins the cycle, right, for the Indian system. I think Aries, Meshu is the first, right?
Yeah, and it's lined up right with the equator. So what I get out of it is that in one way it's telling us that there wouldn't be a wobble to the earth at all if it wasn't for the fact that Daksha forced this god to marry all of his daughters. He said, you know, you can't focus just on this one. You got to marry them all. And that way it made it have to go in a circle. And then because there's rise and falls of where these nakshatras are and everything, that's where you get this, you know, kind of up and down pattern of how the moon moves in our sky. And because of that movement, then we have existence. Basically, a lot of the stories, that's what I can see is at least an underlying theme behind, you know, different Hindu stories and why they do all these mythologies and everything, is that they're trying to explain why there's movement and why the movement isn't just circular, that it's also up and down. And yeah, if he would have just stuck with that one wife, that first initial wife, and only focused on her, then we wouldn't be moving around. The moon wouldn't move at all. It would just stay in one place, essentially. But so I mean, that was kind of, did I answer your question a little bit?
You gave me something new to think about. There's also what are they called, the bhavans, like the houses, right? Like first house, like 12 houses and all that.
Yeah.
Have you studied the Western? You've studied both Western and Eastern astrology?
Yeah, and then the lunar mansions in the Western, they match up pretty tightly if you look at it. I mean, they're basically, there's a few different people that wrote about them. They're like Arabic, I think, mostly what we've gotten for the lunar mansions, and then they say like all the entities associated with it, like Mercury's associated to certain one, all the different planets have different association, and it matches up pretty good with the nakshatras. So I see it's basically explaining the same thing. There's a lot of details in that. I don't want to like go too far into it, but where I see there's patterns in there that we can point out and stuff. But I
you have a
eventually
second part, right? You have like a second part of a presentation you're doing, because I remember you ended on like the golden.
Yeah, this is the irony. We're 2 hours deep and we never got to. We've been asking all those questions.
We're like preloading here the discussion.
Yeah, and this is more of what I want, anyways. Is that I just want to open up a conversation about all this stuff, and we can do as many.
Yeah, do you guys want to do a second episode, like a third episode, so we could cut here and then do a third? We should do another episode right now.
I would like to do another episode, but more like you, Andres, asking, because you guys know the Western stuff. I would just be like mostly listening on the Western stuff. I have like, because I know Sanskrit, I can find out information about like some of like the missing pieces there, but that's, I'm not really able to contribute much on the Western front. But
no worries.
I think it's good to call up coherency though of ideas and be able to help redefine like what we mean by things anyway, because the East has a weird idea of the West has a weird misconception of the East. It's it is what it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I really like just discussing all kinds of things, like anything that gets pulled up. The more people, like even people in chat that have information to add to it, because there's a multitude of information embedded in all these different ideas and everything. And I want to hear all this different stuff because it just adds to the flavor and the real deep understanding of these things. And I, by no means, understand exactly all of it. I just have been trying to understand it and, putting pieces together. And I just want to dive deeper because I think there's some answers. I think things are pointing to stuff when we look at the symbology and everything. And so that's all I'm trying to bring up. And then we can, whatever rabbit hole it takes us down, that's awesome.
Based. Well, do you think, I'd love to hear your presentation. I don't know how much time you guys have. It's only 7. We could
go take care of my family, but
yeah. Okay. So do you want me to record, Giant? Do you have time? Do you want to just record another one right now that's just you doing your presentation, and you could watch that later, and then we can come back and do another question and answer segment? Or are you fatigued because it's 2 hours deep?
Yeah,
I do like 8 hours of podcast a day. I'm a crazy person, so I have to listen to like the humanity of you. So like, yeah, I figured like after 2 hours, I like to test people to see if they're still alive. So yeah, maybe
you sacrificed yourself for the good of all. But like me and it looks like me and Giant, we
we did it.
Here with the family. You're macro.
That's good. I'm glad. Good for you. Like we're gonna do a third episode where we do the presentation. But I think it was worth it to do all these questions. I think it was great to have all this stuff in between them. So
yeah, we need to have Isis and Osiris consecrate your we want to see Andres Jr., man.
The spake Zarathustra.
We could be your grandparents.
No further questions at this time. All right. So love you guys. We'll do this again soon. And thank you for being here.
Nice to meet you, Giant.
Yeah. Nice to meet you too, Noel. Yeah, we'll talk soon.